Fruity Knitting. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Andrew.
And this is episode 93, and we've just come back from New York, where we attended the 10th anniversary of Vogue Knitting Live. It was a 4-day festival, and we were there for just over 4 days, so it really was a whirlwind trip. And this episode is all about the Vogue Knitting Live experience. So we have a mini interview with the Vogue Knitting's Editor-in-Chief, Carla Scott, and then we've got a series of really fun vendor interviews for you, which I think you'll really enjoy. So it's been just a working trip for us, so we didn't have any time to take any classes, and I don't think we even bought any yarn, did we?
No.
Yeah. So it's been a really hectic couple of weeks with all of the travel, the filming, and then all of the editing. So we haven't done a lot of knitting, but I have prepared a tutorial for you on how to adapt a garment pattern to give it set-in sleeves, and that's also coming up later on in the program.
Yeah, so it was really amazing to be able to go to New York. It was only my third trip to America. We went to New York together around 2003, way back then. And I had a short trip to Chicago sometime after that, which was also great. But I always love it going to America. And something that strikes me there is that everything is really big. You know, it does have a real American feel with these big cars and big trucks, and the buses are always big and they look very American. And in New York, of course, you got big buildings. And I love the architecture in New York. My favorite is very clearly the Chrysler building, which I think is great. But there are heaps of buildings that I'd love to look at there. We didn't have time to do that, unfortunately. But being in New York, we know that New York is not representative of America. America's a huge country and there's all sorts of different places there, really. But it did give us both the feeling, I think, that we'd love to get over there and spend more time in different parts of the country. So we need to look at how we can make that possible. But as it was this time, we were in very quickly. We had to come straight back to Germany after the festival to work on the show here.
Yeah, get this episode out.
Yeah.
So while we were actually there at the festival, we hardly left the hotel, but I did want to experience going to a typical American diner. And what we've found is that when we're working intensely like this, it's actually really efficient just to have 2 major meals a day. And so we did find a really good diner just around the corner from the hotel that served the very typical huge American burgers with the sweet potato fries that were all piled up and cascading over like a huge waterfall. It was very impressive looking and very delicious. And those meals definitely keep you full for 6 to 7 hours.
Yeah, that was a really good find. The food is really good, so check it out. And also the inside of the place.
Yeah. So it was fun to have that experience of going and eating typical American food that you see on the movies. But coming up right now is a little collage that I've put together of the festival. So it starts off with just a few of our own impressions of New York and the festival. And then there's a short interview with the Editor-in-Chief, Carla Scott. That was organised on very short notice, so it was great that Carla could give us her time. And then there's some more footage of the fashion shows and the marketplace. And one of the fashion shows was called Kaleidoscope, and the garments in this show were the result of 6 finalists from a competition who were then given mentors from the fashion industry to work with them and further develop their designs. And they're very flamboyant designs and fun to watch. So I hope you enjoy the footage, and we'll see you very soon on the other side. So after a 9.5-hour flight, we finally arrived at the Marriott Marquis Hotel in Times Square, which we barely left for the next 5 days that we were there. And the hotel is famous for the atrium lobby, which rises up 48 floors. And this elevator system is also famous because it's one of the earliest destination dispatch systems where it assigns the passengers to elevator cars according to where they want to go, and that saves time. But it was also a lot of fun to travel on the outside and see those views. Our hotel room was on the 20th floor, and we had a pretty good view over the city towards the Hudson River, which was really nice to wake up to. And we chose to stay in the hotel because we needed to set up our equipment to do interviews and have easy access for our interview guests. And then every evening, Andrew was sorting out and backing up all the previous day's footage. We were right in the middle of the theatre district, and this is the Lund Fontana Theatre. There are around 40 professional theatres right here, and it was really tempting just to ditch all of our plans and go and see a whole lot of shows, but we didn't. We did, however, spend a few of our meal times here at this diner, which was just around the corner, because it had really fast service and the food was really good. To us, it just felt very American, and it was also a really friendly atmosphere. And apparently it won a Best of Year award from the Interior Design magazine. So they did really good burgers with absolutely delicious sweet potato fries. That was my favourite. And this is our breakfast coming. We had omelettes and eggs Benedict. And now, while we're still on the topic of food, we were told to go to Junior's to try the famous cheesecake, which we did. And the story behind this cake is that the founder, Harry Rosen, bought samples of well-known cheesecakes and just worked to reproduce and improve on them. Well, I really liked mine, but Andrew is still on the search for his elusive perfect cheesecake. So back to the marketplace now to take some more footage. And this is a fashion show by Rowan. And you're actually seeing accidental footage where we've both taken footage of each other while we've been working. A huge highlight for me was meeting Crystal Seyfarth, who's the designer of my latest knitting project, the Morning Star bridal jacket, and that's the one I'm wearing, of course. So I was filming some displays and she came up to me, which was a really great surprise, and she really loves the modifications that I did on the jacket, so that made me really happy. The other great highlight for us was to meet up with some of our patrons, which we did on the Sunday. It's always a whole lot of fun to finally see and meet the face behind a name. And one of our patrons asked me to knit a few stitches in her knittings as a form of autograph, which I thought was a particularly cool idea. It's the 10th anniversary of Vogue Knitting Live here in New York, and knitters have come from all around the world for the 3-day festival. And joining me is Vogue Knitting's Editor-in-Chief, Carla Scott, who's kindly taken out some time in her really busy schedule to talk with us. So Carla, it is fantastic to have you on Fruity Knitting. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Good. Okay, now we have viewers from all around the world, and some of them may be planning or thinking about coming to Vogue Knitting Live in New York in the future. Mm-hmm. So tell us about the Vogue Knitting Live New York experience. So what can a first-time visitor look forward to?
Well, first of all, we are in the middle of Times Square in New York City, and on the Marriott Marquis. We expect to have about at least 10,000 people coming and going throughout the 4 days. Actually, it's 4 days. We've added a change to that. It starts on Thursday, ends on Sunday.
Yeah.
We have classes. We have a huge marketplace, 3 floors of marketplace. So there's tons of shopping. You can buy yarn, needles, anything knitting related, creams. It's amazing. We have fashion shows. On Saturday, we have 10 or 12 fashion shows, one every hour from different sponsors, different yarn companies. Vogue Knitting does their own fashion show as well. There's a gala dinner on Saturday night with a keynote speaker, and those are always amazing, and also more fashion shows. And we have a gallery of art where right outside the marketplace, there are knitted, a refrigerator with all different fruits and really fun knitted, crocheted items. And
that sounds like a lot.
It's a lot to take in, and there are lectures, and there are just so many. And the most important thing, there are knitters everywhere, knitters, crocheters, and they all have that same thing in common. And people come, and they make friends, and they come back,
and it's great to see what everyone's wearing,
and everyone's wearing their knitted garments. And then we do a Readers on the Runway show at the end of the day on Saturday, so people will knit sweaters from Vogue Knitting magazine, and we'll do a quick fashion show, and there'll be a few winners, and that's really fun to see those sweaters back. Some come from the 80s, and they've made them and they show them off, and it's really, really exciting. So it's just a lot of excitement, knitting, crocheting all day, every day.
So how has the festival changed over the last 10 years, and have there been any special events or highlights prepared to mark the anniversary for this year?
Oh yes, the 10th anniversary. Well, many changes have been made. We have made the marketplace more accessible. Before it was so crammed with so many people, so we've made a lot more space. We've made space for wheelchairs and people that need extra space. We have a quiet room now, which is really nice. So if you just need a little bit of quiet, you can go there. We have added Sunday. We're doing more fashion shows on Sunday, so we've added that. We have an amazing keynote speaker. His name is Laduma. He's from South Africa. And it just so happens it's his 10-year anniversary as well. So we're really happy to have him there. And it's going to be amazing.
It is, yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, now Carla, you have actually been working with Vogue Knitting since the 80s.
Yes, I have.
And there's been so many huge changes in the industry. For example, through Ravelry, there's been a rise in independent designers and yarn producers.
Yes.
Advertising has changed dramatically.
Tremendously,
with
yes.
social media, and self-publishing is now more
Yes.
common and easier to do, and people
Right.
are going to YouTube to learn things. And these changes are all quite challenging for established companies. So
Yes.
how has Vogue Knitting handled these changes, and what's their direction for the future?
Yes, it's been quite a challenge, especially in the advertising area. And what we try to do is be special. We have relaunched our Ultimate Knitting book, which is the A to Z of knitting, and people, it's their Bible. And by doing that, we're helping them to find whatever they want. They don't, yes, you can go to YouTube, but these books are just invaluable. You can get the magazine digitally, which has helped a lot. We sell our older patterns online, so we're trying to use online to bring people in. We're looking to, we know that we want that younger group of people to get in, so we're all on the social media with Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And we've got some young people at the office, so they're handling all that and making sure that everyone's included, and those are the kind of things that we're trying to do.
But it has been difficult, hasn't it? Everyone's had to really change gears, I think, in their thinking.
Yes, you have, and the social media has made, and the Ravelry, everyone's a designer, and there are a lot of indie dyers out there, smaller companies, and obviously they can't afford advertising, and you say yes, they can do their own advertising. So we're just trying hard we do online advertising as well on our website. We're doing all of those kind of things as well. And we have a YouTube channel where we post our videos, which I think sometimes the YouTube videos are not as good as they could be. So we do them very professionally, and a lot of times I do the actual hand work. And so we're trying all those avenues to just continue to grow.
Yeah, good. Okay, now what about the fashion trends? What can we expect to see in knitwear and hand knitting over the next couple of seasons? So what will the dominant colours be? What kinds of silhouettes in the garments can we see? Because we've had a lot of boxy and loose, so is that going to continue?
That is still continuing. The color of the year is the classic blue, which I'm so excited. It's my favorite color, and blue shows up knitting so well. Yes, the boxy's still around, but you're also seeing dresses and skirts. Love that so much. So you're also seeing more fitted garments, and we're doing something called a capsule collection in the spring, and that is where it's a wardrobe, basically putting together a mix and match wardrobe. So basic stitches, basic colors, and you can mix and match them. Cardigan goes with over top of a top, or short sleeve pullover, 3/4 sleeve sweater, that you can mix and match, and back to more basic yarns as well.
Yeah. And I suppose it's really driven now by being sustainable.
That is the
And
big
the
thing.
source of the fiber.
The source of the fiber, absolutely. That is the big thing that everyone's talking about now is sustainability in the way that they produce the yarn and in just your hand knitwear. You use it over and over again, and it's...
Yeah. Now, what about knitting techniques? Because everyone wants to know what's the
Yes.
latest or what's coming up is going to be exciting.
Right,
What kinds of
right.
techniques?
So, brioche has been around for a while, and that's, it's still booming, and I'm amazed how many people haven't done it yet. But they're back to those traditional stitches, the ferrules, the argyles, the simpler stitches, the yokes. Top down is...
Yeah, but that's been around for a while.
But it's not going away.
Yeah.
A lot of these patterns and stitches are staying a lot longer.
Yeah. And what about mosaic knitting? Have you seen, because that's taken over.
That was there a while ago, and it seems to me maybe coming back again.
Yeah, it's sort of like the beginner's ferrule because it's so easy to get
Yes.
into and to start working with colour, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
I love doing mosaic, and I tell people if they haven't done color work, try that first because it is very easy. Yes, that was around a while ago. It could be coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. So thank you so much
Oh,
for
you're
being
welcome.
generous with your time.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, my name is May White, and this is my second year at Vogue Knitting. What I love most about being here, spending time with my friends, and seeing all the inspiration by everyone's knitwear. And one of my favorite stores is Loopy Mango. I love the colors, and I just love their yarn.
And my name's Britta, and this is my second year at Vogue Knitting with Smay. And our favorite part is being with all our friends and meeting you guys and getting Creo yarn and seeing all the fashion shows. It's really great. It's an amazing experience.
Hi, my name is Tatenda Dykstra. I'm from Wisconsin, but originally from Zimbabwe. I'm here at Vogue Knitting Live. This is my very first time, and I've been to a couple of classes, but I've also been doing some volunteering and just kind of assisting. I was helping out with some people that had bought skeins of yarn and helping them wind their skeins of yarn. And I also have been helping with kind of showing people like where to go if they're kind of lost and trying to make their way around. I guess the most exciting thing for me has been seeing all the things that people are wearing and all the really cool garments. That probably is the most exciting part for me.
Hi, I'm Linda. I'm from Westfield, New Jersey, and this is my third time at Vogue Knitting. The highlight for me is the market. I just love the diversity and the selection of yarn from small indie dyers to big companies.
Hi, I'm Claudia, also from Westfield, New Jersey. This is my first time at Vogue Knitting Live, and I'm an art major, and for my senior project, I'm designing sweaters based on Shakespeare characters. So I'm here to get inspiration on sweater shapes and textures and to look at all the different yarns.
Hi, I'm Kate Pulaski. This is my third time attending Vogue Knitting Live, and I like to come and see what everyone's wearing and get inspiration from other knitters. I've seen a lot of the Love Note by Tin Can Knits this year, and there have been quite a few Soldatnas by Caitlin Hunter also. So it's just really exciting, and it's a fun time to be around others with the same interests that I have. I am wearing the Elton by Joji Locatelli, and actually a jewel closure on it. And I actually got to meet Joji this morning, so that was really exciting for me.
Welcome back. We have an operatic theme going on in this episode. So for music lovers, you've just heard excerpts from La Traviata, Mozart's Così fan tutti, and Juliet's waltz from Gounod's Romeo and Juliet. And I just think this wonderful music really matches the extravagance and excitement of New York and the festival. And in particular, all of those fabulously flamboyant costumes you just saw on the runway.
Yeah. And I think all of the music is coming today either from the US Air Force Band or the MIT Symphony Orchestra and Choir, which is very appropriate.
Yes, it's
for our
more
American
theme.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so there's more of the festival coming up later, but right now it's you with some knitting.
Well, it's knitting. We have to come to me. So in the last episode, we did start a new knit along on tuck stitches and brioche lace, where you can enter any design that uses one of those techniques. We have had a little bit of confusion and can I say controversy because technically brioche is a tuck stitch, but we did actually start this cal to encourage you and give you the opportunity to explore all the different sorts of tuck stitches that Nancy Marchant has documented and described in her new book, and also to explore the new techniques that she's created for brioche lace. So it's not just a brioche cal. We know that some people are having trouble getting Nancy's books, although I do think they're in stock in the US and in Europe, so it's pretty good. But just to make it clear, you can enter any designer's patterns in this cal. They're all allowed. You can enter any design that says it includes either tuck stitches or brioche lace. Yeah. If you do have Nancy's books, it would be really cool to see more entries which are just taking just swatches from either of the stitch dictionaries, because there are stitch dictionaries in both books.
Yeah, here's one of them here.
Yep, so there's the one book. Or just designs from either of the books. It'd be cool to see them actually being used and to hear about people's experience of working with them.
Definitely, it's inspiring to see.
Yeah, and we know that not everyone wants to get into every cal that we do, which is of course fine. But I would suggest that you just have a look at the thread, because you can see all these amazing things that people are doing, and it's really inspiring and interesting. So have a look. And a big thank you to everyone who has already joined in this trying out these new techniques.
Yeah.
I'm joining in and trying out the new techniques. So last episode, I showed you the first part of my swatch, which is down the bottom here. That's pattern number 52, which is a triple tuck stitch. It's actually a 6-row pattern, and it's 2 stitches wide in each row. So pretty easy. We actually did 40 stitches on this swatch, so that's good for that one. The new one that I'm doing is again a triple tuck stitch, but this one's got a 4-row repeat, and it's a 3-stitch pattern, so it doesn't quite fit in the 40 stitches, so we've actually just got a spare stitch on the end here. Would have been perfect to go for 42, because 42 is divisible by 2 and 3, so it would have worked for both.
Did you say what number swatch this was?
That's number 52, that's number 49.
Okay, this is the back of number 52, just so you have a quick look.
Yep, so I'll show you a close-up here. And what you can see for the new one here, the 3 stitches, it's kind of knit, and then a slip and yarn over. And you do that across the row, of course, and I do that for 3 rows, one after another. And then on the 4th row, I knit the stitches that have been slipped. So the original stitch and then the 3 yarn overs. And that's actually what makes the tuck. And it's a really interesting material that you get. If you look at the close-up, you can see it's quite loose along that tuck, which is interesting. And if you look at the reverse side of it, it also looks really good. So I'm having a great time with this. I find it's not as hard as I was expecting. I did do some brioche very early on, and I know I had lots of mistakes in that, but I'm kind of getting around this pretty well, and it's really addictive. It's fun.
So we're going to continue on with Under Construction with me, and I'm knitting Alistair Moore's design, which is Irish moss. It's an all-over cable design, and it's going to be a jumper for Andrew.
Yay.
So you're a lucky guy. And I'm doing it in Millpost Merino DK weight yarn here, and it's my project for the patron-only knit-along, which is being held in the Patron Community Forum. And there's been a lot of lovely projects entered in this knit-along, and most of them are finished, so I have to get cracking with mine. But this knit-along is due to be finished at the end of January, and we have decided to extend it for one more week to the 7th of, that's a Friday, the 7th of February. So Andrew will open up another thread where you can just post pictures of your finished garments, and then we'll pick a couple of winners.
Yep.
So the Irish moss design is designed with the construction of a combination of drop shoulder and saddle shoulder, and I'm going to modify it to be a combination of a set-in sleeve with saddle shoulder, and I'm going to show you all the steps that I take to do that. But I'll show you this jumper first. It's another one that I've knitted for Andrew. It's also by Alistair Moore, St. Bridget's, and it has a modified drop shoulder, saddle shoulder combination, just to show you. So a drop shoulder means that the front and the back pieces will go directly up from the sides in a straight line straight up to the shoulders. In a modified drop shoulder, it means at the armholes, you cast off in a straight line, somewhere between 3 or 5 centimetres, just in a straight line, and then you go straight up to the shoulders. What that does is take a little bit of material out and make it a little less bulky. But the sleeve shaping itself is exactly the same as the drop shoulder, meaning that it's straight across at the top of the sleeve. So that's a drop shoulder. And then the saddle construction, which I'll show you here, just means that the center panel of the sleeve travels up over the shoulders and joins up to the neckline. And this is a really typical construction for traditional cable all over cable jumpers. And just so that you understand how all the parts of the garment come together, I've drawn a little diagram for you. There are 4 separate pieces, a front, a back, and 2 sleeves. The back piece has no neck shaping, it's just a rectangle, and the front piece has a small bit of shaping, but apart from that, it's also a rectangle just like the back. Now, the upper part of the sleeves have no shaping at all, and this makes the garment a drop shoulder design. The top of the sleeves are just a straight line except for the saddle pieces, which are usually a continuation of the center cable panel on the sleeve, and that's really cool. In this diagram, you'll see that the saddle part of the sleeve goes right up to the neckline, and the sides of the saddle are sewn to the front and back shoulders. Now, it's the saddle pieces that make the neckline drop on both the front and the back pieces, and that's why there's no shaping on the back and just a little bit of shaping on the front. So the saddle piece is usually between 6 and 10 centimeters wide for an adult garment. And on my design, the width of the saddle is 6 centimeters. So half of that goes to the back, which means the back neck shaping will be 3 centimeters deep, and that's enough of a drop for the back neck shaping. And the other 3 centimeters gets added to the 5 centimeter deep shaping that's already been done on the front neck. And this makes the drop at the front neck to be 8 centimeters in total, which is fairly typical for an adult sweater. So this diagram shows you the modifications that I'm going to make. Instead of having drop shoulders on my sleeve, I want to have set-in sleeves. And that means that I need to do underarm shaping on both the front and the back pieces. And I also need to do sleeve cap shaping on the 2 sleeve pieces. Now, what stays the same is the saddle shoulders and the neck shaping, and that's really important to know. So I can use the stitch counts and the measurements from the written pattern for the saddle part of the sleeve and the front and back neck shaping. But I will need to work out all the measurements and stitch counts for the armhole shaping. So it's really handy to know what parts of the pattern that you can keep, what parts of their calculations and numbers you can keep to save yourself time, and what other parts that you need to figure out yourself. So today in this episode, I'm just going to show you how I calculate this armhole shaping on the front and the back pieces, because I don't want to overwhelm you with too much sort of talk and too many calculations. When I come to knitting Andrew's sleeves, I'll tell you how I calculate the sleeve cap that'll go with this armhole. And then when I've done both of them, I'll put both of those together, condense it into a tutorial, and I'll make it available for our patrons on the Patreon site. So when you're doing this, when you're figuring out these calculations here, what's really important is 3 major calculations. The widest part of the chest, the upper back measurement. The upper back measurement is from here to here, but on your back, and the armhole depth. They're the 3 ones that are important. With the upper back measurements, that's really important for a set-in sleeve, because if it's too wide, then the shoulder seam will fall over the edge of your shoulder, and it'll add extra fabric here under the arms, and it'll start to look like a drop shoulder again, which is what you don't want. If the upper back measurement is too narrow, then the shoulder seam won't sit on the edge, but it'll sit somewhere on top of your shoulder like this. And as you can see, it'll pull the sleeve cap up over the top of your shoulder like this, and you'll lose length in your sleeve, and your sleeves could end up too short. So you have to be aware of that. So it's very, very important when you're modifying to know your gauge very well. The stitch gauge will give you all of the width measurements you need. The row gauge will give you all of the length measurements you need. Sometimes what's difficult with all over cables is that every single cable is going to have a different gauge depending on how dense it is. But with traditional Aran sweaters or all over cabled sweaters, what they often do is, and particularly on the larger sizes, is have a fair bit of filler stitch at the side seams. And with a bit of luck, that's where you'll be doing your shaping. So you really only need to know the gauge for the filler stitch. And in my case, it's moss stitch here. And most of my shaping is done across the moss stitch, so I can just work with my moss stitch gauge. So that's really handy to know. Now, I've knitted this jumper with 5 to 8 centimetres ease for Andrew, which is pretty average fit. It's not too big, not too small. Andrew looks really good in slimline.
Sounds just right, does.
Yes, Goldilocks. Now, because the garment is worked in pieces, we're just looking at the width of a front or back piece. Now, Andrew's chest width of the garment has to be 53 centimetres wide, and his upper back measurement has to be 42 centimetres wide. So that means I have to get rid of 11 centimetres in total, which is 5.5 centimetres at each armhole. Now, with my moss stitch gauge, I need to decrease 24 stitches, so that's going to be 12 stitches at each armhole, and the armholes are usually decreased over a length of 4 to 7 centimetres. So I'm going to decrease over a length of 5.5 centimetres, and that translates as 18 rows. You don't have to be absolutely exact with this. This is just a basic measurement. So if you think of just one side at a time, that means I'm decreasing 12 stitches over 18 rows. And if you want to, you can plot the decrease on graph paper to ensure that you're going to get a really smooth armhole slope. But there are just a few general rules to help you. The initial bind off is usually 1.5 to 2.5 centimetres, followed by successively fewer stitches and ending with a few single stitch bind offs. So I'm decreasing to start off with 4 stitches, and that's 2 centimetres. Then I'm going to decrease 3 stitches, which is 1 centimetre, then 1 stitch every alternate row 3 times, and then 1 stitch every 4th row, and I'll do that 2 times. So at each armhole, I'm getting rid of 5 centimetres width, and I'm doing that over a length of 5.5 centimetres. So naturally, all of those exact calculations are very specific to this design and Andrew's body. So
you'll all be qualified to make me a sweater.
Yeah. So that's the method of how to do it. Now, I do know that a lot of people just have an initial fear about trying to do this, and I certainly did too to start off with. But what you can do, just to sort of help you get over that fear, is to take a garment that you've already knitted that has set-in sleeves and that really fits you well, and then recalculate it to fit or to work with a yarn that's of a completely different gauge, so that you could knit it up in a completely different gauge, but it would have the same shaping. And then just make a swatch of this area here. Just, you don't even need to go straight up, just this little area here, and block it, and then lay that swatch on top of your already knitted garment at the armhole and see that it has the same shaping. That should give you a lot of confidence that the way you've calculated it has worked. And then if you do that a couple of times, nothing's going to stop you. But it is really important not to cut corners on having an exact gauge. You need to know your gauge exactly, and you need to know your measurements exactly. Don't cut corners on those. Don't be fudgy with that. So if you know that exactly, then you can have a cup of tea, a glass of something stronger, and then go slowly with the calculations, and nothing can go wrong. So I hope that's helpful.
Sounds good.
Did I bore you to tears?
No,
It was pretty long-winded.
I think it's good.
Good.
Coming up now are 5 short interviews that we've got with Vogue Knitting Live vendors. Each of the vendors that Andrea's picked out here is unique in what they're producing, but also in their business stories. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy meeting them just as much as we did.
Yeah.
3 of the vendors are offering Fruity Knitting patrons a discount on their online stores. You can find out the details of that on Patreon as always, but I'll give you a quick overview here. Katie from Katrinkles is offering a 20% discount on her wonderful high-quality wooden buttons and tools for knitting and crocheting. Katie uses locally sourced sustainable wood, and the buttons are machine washable, which is really brilliant. Amy from Knit Collage is offering a 20% discount for our patrons to use on any of her patterns and yarns. Knit Collage, as you'll see, is very innovative and creative. It's hand-spun by a team of Indian women who Amy works very closely with. And there are all sorts of interesting bits of sari silk, handmade flowers and other extras spun into the yarns, making them very exciting to knit with. And Maggie from Maggie Knits in Northern Ireland is offering our patrons a 25% discount on all of her yarns and kits. Maggie's been in the industry for a long time and she has some very hardcore fans who really love her special techniques of garment construction and how they suit all body shapes. So thank you very much to those 3 vendors for offering our patrons a discount. We have wonderful patrons who recognise the work we put into producing this show, and we are truly grateful for their support and for their encouragement. There are many different business models that could be used to produce a show like this. The model that we've chosen is to make the show available for free, but to ask our regular viewers for financial support. And I think this is a really great model because it allows you, the viewers, to compensate us directly for the work that we put in and also for the value that you get out of the show.
And as well with our guests, our interviews are never spontaneous. Our guests also put in effort, both in preparation and carrying out their interviews. And we make the show available for free so that the guests will get enough views to make their effort worthwhile. So we really do love producing the show, but it is a total lifestyle commitment to do so and tremendous work, and we do want to be fairly compensated. And it really just takes a small amount to become a patron on a monthly basis, and that makes a real contribution to the show. So if you are watching regularly, please do become a patron. Take the time to go to the Patreon site and become a Patreon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So coming up now are our vendor interviews. They are really great people, so it's going to be heaps of fun. Thank you very much for being with us today. I've enjoyed it, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Bye.
Bye.
So this is where you come to get high quality wooden buttons and tools for all of your knitting and crochet projects. And with me is Katie, the founder of Katrinkles. Katie, your background is in jewellery making and laser cutting, and that's how it all started for you. So tell us about your company and what products you've brought along to Vogue Knitting Live.
So I went to school to be a goldsmith, and I worked in fine jewelry and costume jewelry, and I took a workshop in laser cutting, thinking I would use it for jewelry, but as a knitter, I ended up really making buttons. So I was doing it just for fun and making my own buttons, and other people wanted them, so I started selling them online. And I just kept getting busier and busier. So in 2015, I bought my first laser machine, and then in 2016, I left my job in order to work only on Katrinkles. So now we're a team of 6 people, and we have 4 laser cutting machines, and we just make buttons and tools for people. We make custom things for yarn shops, and we make our own line of things to sell.
We've got a box of goodies here, so tell me what's in it.
So we make buttons. These are bamboo, which is washable. Bamboo is sustainable. These are cherry. This is a wraps per inch tool and a knitting needle gauge, and the cherry is milled for us custom in Rhode Island, and it's a local material which is renewable and sustainable.
And cherry's a hardwood, isn't it?
Yes, cherry is a hardwood. And then these are birch. These are some of my new products. I have an adjustable pom-pom maker and a set of tassel making tools that are very cute. These are all made out of birch. And then we make things also out of cedar. These are some cedar charms that you can put in your knitting bag to keep it smelling fresh. And since I'm a jeweler, I make knitting jewelry in the form of knitting needle gauges and wraps per inch tools that you can wear around your neck or on your ears.
Now, do you have a particular product that's new for this Vogue Knitting Live this year?
I'm really excited about our new mitten blockers. We have sock blockers also that are adjustable, and these mitten blockers, you can do 3 widths of mitten, and you can make 5 lengths of mitten. And the bamboo I'm sorry, this is birch. Actually, the birch can go in the washer and it can get wet. And
That's amazing. That's really great to know, particularly with the buttons, because you don't want to have to take them off the garment every time you wash them.
And then the mini tools are our most popular tool, and we now make 24 different ones. And I added 3 new ones at this show. So there's all different knitting needle gauges and knitting instruction tools and tools for spinning. And at this show, I've added a Diz and garter stitch Kitchener, and then a mitten-sized tool. These are cherry.
Great. Okay, that's fantastic. So I'm definitely going to have to put in some pictures here because the booth looks so beautiful. It's really immaculately set out and it's really light and it looks exciting. So I really hope you have a lot of success.
Thank you so much.
I'm here with Amy Small from Knit Collage, and we're in such a happy and pretty booth here. It's full of vibrant hand-spun creations. Amy, can you tell us a little bit of background about yourself as a designer and your company, and then show us some of the goodies that you've brought to Vogue Knitting Live?
Yes, I would absolutely love to, Andrea. So my business is Knit Collage, which I started about 10 years ago now, this January. And our specialty is really hand-spun yarn. So I started out as a sweater designer where I used to make these sweaters called the kitchen sink sweaters, which now it's really evolved into the kitchen sink yarns. But as I was designing sweaters, I just sort of burned out of the fast fashion culture. It was, 10 new cardigans a month, and it just got really old. And so on the side, I started spinning yarn, and I just became totally addicted, spent all my money on a spinning wheel and a carder, and fell hard. So when I first started spinning, the yarns I was making were really lumpy, bumpy, crazy textures, all sorts of things that were spun into them like flowers and ribbons. And I loved the way it looked. And I know really hardcore traditional spinners would cringe at that, but they made me really happy. And I didn't see anything like that in the market. So I thought, hey, I'll just try this. And it's a long story. I took them to a trade show. Probably 8 stores bought them, and I just felt like, okay, maybe I have something. And so slowly, it's evolved from that. And it evolved from me spinning all the yarns to now I work with and employ 13 women in India that spin it all. So we really do the whole process. We card the fiber by hand. So some of the yarns, which I will show you here. So some of the yarns have over 10 fiber colors actually carded together in them, which is one of my favorite things. So this is our castaway yarn, and it's a really lumpy, bumpy texture. It's core spun, it's soft, and you don't have to do much with it for it to really pack a punch of wow. So that's one of my favorites. So they hand card the yarn, and then the women that we work with, they also spin all these little things into the yarn. So here are some of our yarns. This is Daisy Chain and Dreamland, and these have all these little flowers and ribbons and pieces of fabric spun into the yarn. And what I love about this is, the women that we work with, they actually make all of these trims too, so that's really fun. They're all threaded and then hand spun into the yarn. But what I love when you're knitting this is you never know what you're gonna get as you come, so it feels a little bit like opening a present as you knit the yarn. So this is a really, really fun one. And I just wanted to show you one more. This is a mini skein sampler kit, and these are really fun for people that have never tried our yarn before because you get to try 5 different yarns at once. And we have now a lot of patterns that work with just a mini skein kit. So you get daisy chain, our cotton yarn, and I love sweaters that feel really artistic in mixed up yarns. So they really have that feeling to them.
And is this also one of the kits?
This is one of the kits we're selling at Vogue Knitting Live, but this is like an example. It's called the Pixelated Beret Hat Pattern, just simple color work. And I love the way this cotton fabric that we that we also sell works in color work mixed up with our spun cloud yarn. Looks really good.
I particularly love the sweater you're wearing. Just tell us very briefly about that, because that's the same combination, isn't it, with the cotton?
Actually, the hat goes with this sweater, so it's called the Pixelated Cardi. We ran it for our fall knit along, and it's really simple top-down construction, more dense with the fabric yarn at the top, and then it kind of disperses. But one of my favorites, I just love the mix of the print with the solid. So yeah, love this.
It's really stunning. Okay, now very quickly, I can see this one, and that's looking great. So tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so this is one of my favorites. It's called the Bonfire Shawl. I have a free class on how to knit it on my website, and you use one of those mini skeins and then a main color, which is the spun cloud, and it gives you an opportunity to really try all of our different yarns. And I think it's a great project for the person who's maybe a hair above a beginner and wants to learn like picot edge, double increases, things like that.
Cool. Now, this is a stunning design behind it. I think this is a new release, especially for Vogue Knitting Live, isn't it?
Yes, I am so excited about this sweater. It is called Shakespeare in the Park, and it is by a designer named Park Williams, who is a dream, will she say yes to this collaboration? And she said yes to doing a pattern design for us. So it's been a long time in the making. We have it available in 9 sizes, so from a 32-inch bust, because it's meant to be worn with negative ease, up to a 62-inch bust, so 9 sizes. And one of my favorite things is this amazing sleeve detail. So it's like a throwback to Shakespeare times, very theatrical feeling. It's knit from the bottom up, and then you connect and do your color work yoke.
Okay, and I think you can probably do a fair few alterations on this. Like, I love the sleeves this big, but you could also make them a little slimmer, or you could make that a bit longer. Is that right?
Absolutely. So we've given the whole schematics for all the sizes. So if you want to follow the schematics for the smaller sleeve size and you're knitting a bigger size, no problem. And of course, add length. For sure.
Well, that's really, really a great design. And thank you so much for being on Fruity Knitting. And good luck with your little group of 13 women, I think, who've stayed with you for the whole time of the business. That's really fantastic. And that you taught them to spin yourself. So that's very exciting. It's a great little story behind your business. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's been awesome. Okay.
It's such a pleasure for me to meet Maggie Jackson here from Northern Ireland, who's been in the knitwear designing business now for over 40 years with her company Maggie Knits. And during this time, she's won a string of major awards, both for her designs and her business. So Maggie, now you're specialising in designer knitting kits. Can you tell us a bit about your work? What's important to you when you design, and show us some of your designs?
Okay, I'd love to do that. As I said, it's been 43 years designing, and my business has evolved from doing ready-to-wear and selling to Neiman's, Neiman Marcus here, Nordstrom, international boutiques in Japan, where I did fabric sewing as well. And then I did a knitting show here 20 years ago, and everything all completely changed. So the part of the business knitting side of it was only 20%, and now it's 100% of the business. And knitting is so huge here, and the joy for me, instead of sending things abroad into a boutique that I don't see on people, is at shows here. People come and I bring samples for them to try on, and it's important to me it's the right colour for them, it's complementary to them, but it also has to be an interesting knit, so they finish it. So it's not sitting along with their other projects at home. And I very much would like to show you the type of knitting I do, which has its own signature style that people recognise.
This is a stunning looking design. Can you start by telling us about this design? What's important to you and how is it constructed?
Okay, this is started at the back and then goes up, and then it's split into 2 sections at the right and the left at the front. I tend to do things with stepped hems. I very rarely do something at a straight round because I think it's complementary to all shapes and sizes. And if you're a larger size, then this is very slimming on you as well, and it stays on the shoulders. The what is characteristic of a Maggie knit design, and has been for 43 years, is the tubes. And people would recognise it and say, oh, that's a Maggie, which I find quite funny. This is pure Donegal tweed, which is, I have my own yarn line, because it's important to me, the drape and the hang of the yarns, and it's complementary to the figures. And you know, it's, if you're going to spend all that time knitting something, you want it to feel good. A lot of people knit sweaters and they never wear them because they don't feel good in them. You want this to hang and drape, and you feel as if you're not really wearing something. So one of the yarns that I love with the drape here, and I have various colours, is from my own homeland, Ireland, and it's pure Irish Donegal tweed. And then we have in sections of here like the linen. We don't do Irish linen anymore, unfortunately, and this is made in Spain, and that's the nearest to what we have. And so that's linen and cotton, and I'll show you something in that in a minute. Now on the back of this, when you're working up, and again you see I do a lot of moss stitch in knitting because it lies flat and it's complementary. The inspiration from this, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you know the dark hedges in Ireland, and that's where the trees are all twisted. So I twisted the stitches here to give you that look in it too. And it just hangs and drapes over your shoulders. You can wear it over a shirt, over a jacket or a coat outside, and so it keeps your shoulders nice and warm.
There's another one here I want to quickly have a little look at. It's got buttons all over it. Is it quite typical for you to add lots of bits and bobs on your design?
I like making the designs different and unique, and I think if you spend time doing something, you want it to be different and to be noticed. Again, you'll notice the same idea, the stepped hem, which again in a sweater is very complementary. And with the linen, it's lightweight, and all you're doing here is a purl stitch. It's like knit 11, purl 1, and the purl stitch marks where you put the button on it. And it makes it different, or you could add a bead, which I have in some of the other designs as well too. Or if you want, you can just have it plain. I tend to do, we have our own range of buttons, these ones here that are in the kits as well, and I like to do cowls and extra pieces. It's still coming from the fashion world that everything all coordinates together.
Okay, now we've got really quickly a little bit of time to show us. You've got a new design specially for Vogue Knitting Live, so can you show that to us now?
Yes, of course. Okay, this is a coat in the Irish Donegal tweed as well, and you can also make it a shorter length as opposed to a longer length. And it really is moss stitch and stockinette. And again, the tweed drapes beautifully. And again, here, similar to the one I showed with the buttons, this is the same thing where it's like knit 11, purl 1, and the purl stitch marks where you just tie on the rag. Very simple to do. And then we have the shawl pin in the kit as well. And Kim, if you would turn around for me here. And see, then you've got the tassels on the back, and it's a very simple, but it's a statement piece. You're going to get noticed in it. So thank you, Kim. And I'd like to show you then Melanie. When I was doing fashion, I had everything coordinated, and it's very difficult for me in the fashion or in the knitting world not to do coordinated items. So we have like the knitted waistcoat here, which coordinates with the over cardigan, and again just hanging down a shirt. So if you're a bigger size, if you want to hide your tummy, whatever, it's how you wear it. It's complementary. On this red, and then again we have our own buttons and the cowl to match, so they can all be worn as separate items. On the back of this coat, Melanie, if you can just turn round for me, this is where I look a lazy way of knitting, so I've done this in stripes. I'm not somebody for carrying yarns across, so I did a back stitch to get the plaid effect afterwards. And again, this is just one section, and then this is a section, and then this is a section. So it's small pieces to carry around, and it's just really like scarves you're knitting. But it's very complementary, and at the hem, I just then did a cord, an eye cord, and just tied it through like that. All right? Thank you, Melanie. This one is knit in sections again in the tweed, eye cords woven through, And again, gives you, it's complementary, it's slimming as opposed to being straight round. But you're doing different stitches so you don't get bored in the sections. And then we have it in lots of different colours as well. And this fits somebody from a size 0 to an extra large. So I hope you've enjoyed the time listening about Maggie Knits. Thank you very much.
I'm now in the Freya Fibres booth with Tina Whitmore. Tina, you were the very first dyer to create hand-dyed gradient yarns and sell them on a global scale. And now, despite many other dyers also doing gradient yarns, I think Freya Fibres still stands out as being super innovative with intensely beautiful colours. So I know you've got a background in photography and fine art. Can you tell us what is important to you when you're working with colour and you're developing new yarns?
Well, when I dye the colours, my background in terms of photography is that dyeing is very similar. I don't just have a pot of brown. You know, I work with my art background with the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and from that create a colour palette. And then I take that a step further, and generally most of my colorways are not straight light to dark. But I'll put together somewhat unusual combinations, and then I'll also play with the tone and the hue and so on to make it, take it another step further. I mean, I have a couple of bits and bobs here. So this is a grapevine colorway, and so it's not just plain yellow. It's like this sort of acidic yellow, and then done with a really rich purple, and it goes through a brown. And I've got, you know, a more neutral color, but it's still very saturated. And even though it's pale, it has a deep depth of colour to it.
Yeah. And you're taking really interesting hues of colours and making a journey like that are really opposing, and then just sort of joining them together on a journey. It's so creative.
That's a really lovely way of a journey. I like that. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Okay. Now, tell us about the yarn itself. I think you have your own custom spun yarn.
Yeah, so it's important to me to be local as much as possible. So, and also I'm very particular about what I want to work with. What I've done is I work with a couple different mills to have the yarn that I want to knit with, which has resulted in it's an American-based grown yarn. It's spun fairly local. I mean, within, you know, the region, let's say, of what's on the eastern seaboard, so to speak. So all the work is done locally. So we're not flying yarn across the world and back. It's very particular for what I want to work with. So I have a single ply fingering, for example. I have this 2-ply lace. I also make a super bulky in a gradient, which is, I think, fairly unusual. I take the gradient and I do it across all weights of yarn because that's what I want to knit with, and I figure I'm not the only one that wants to do that.
And it's probably pretty difficult to do a gradient on a bulky, so you must have figured out new techniques for that.
Yeah, I mean, I had to sort of invent the machinery to get it set up and ready for dyeing. It's not normal.
I know you've also got another technique with your spinning or with your custom yarn so that it slightly felts a bit. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
So the process of dyeing is the dyeing process. It cooks overnight, and that the length of time that it cooks and the way that we do it, it ends up very, very slow. I mean, it's not a felted yarn, but what happens is, so the single ply fingering is actually quite strong. So some people who might be hesitant about working with a single ply, they will find that it's as strong as a plied yarn, and it also has, what's nice is you get really nice stitch definition. It doesn't end up fuzzy, so like a single ply might. And again, that's a result of the very slight felting that happens with it. It's a nice effect.
Okay, so there's some stunning looking jumpers around here. They're just really beautiful. So you obviously do kits, and I think you've also done a new colour palette recently called watercolour. So tell us about that.
So I found, I've been working with gradients for a long time, and then if you look, something like this, which is quite bold, you don't always want to be wearing something so bold. You want something that's more toned down. So I started playing with let me get rid of this, these here. So for example, where you still have a gradient, but it's more toned down. And so you can do things like make a sweater with it, where and it's something that you can wear every day without being like wild, crazy colors. And so it's basically a more wearable color palette. So I have, they're quite muted right at the moment. There's only 8 currently, I think 8, but, I'm always adding more colors. So here's just 3 of them. So this is like an inky blue, and, it's sort of seafoam, so on and so forth. So I'm pretty excited about those because you can actually make like sweaters. Like this is done in the green one, for example. So it's sort of a kinder, gentler gradient.
Okay, and then you've got the minikins, which you can use for colour work or just adding a bit of something extra.
Exactly. So, and here's a couple of the minikins here. So for example, this is my fingering weight yarn, and in addition to doing from lace to super bulky, I take the fingering and I offer it in different put-ups, from a minikin, which is 100 yards, to this, which is a half a mile of yarn. And it's the same weight of yarn, but here, I grab the sleeve here. So this is where it's really perfect use of the minikin to get a little bit of ferrule detail. You don't have a ton of extra yarn left over, you have what you need.
So you can pretty well knit anything you want amongst your yarns. It's not just a gradient, which is brilliant.
A lot of people are so used to seeing gradients only used for shawls, and there's so much more you can do with it. And so hopefully I can sort of educate people where to go with that gradient that they might not have seen before.
Well, I've really enjoyed meeting you and seeing your stunning stuff up close, so thank you so much.
Pleasure to meet you as well. Thank you so much.
If you want to add lots of fun and excitement to your knitting, then you really need to have Stephen B as your knitting guru. He's the self-proclaimed master of mixology, which really just means he's a genius
thank you.
at combining anything with absolutely anything. And Stephen's also a really passionate teacher, and he's been putting on some fabulous workshops during Vogue Knitting Live. Stephen, I've heard it said that once you've done a class or one of your workshops, that your students' most hated colours become their new favourites.
They become passionate about it because they've realized they ignite their knitting.
Yeah.
They empower their patterns. I'm flamboyant, so I go a little farther and over the top, so they can rise to a certain level. They don't go all the way with me, but they add. And when you've taken a pattern and you've been with me, it could be life-changing. I heard that today. And then, so I add some texture and some glitter, and I'm all about one and breaking outside the box. And once you've done that, you Stephen B'd your project. It's a transitive verb, meaning to take something further than it was intended to go in the first place.
Could you do that to this one?
I could. I'd lovely.
What would you do?
It would have a little lurex in just the dots, because we don't want to razor too quickly. The shock value may be overwhelming. But I'm right now I'm really bringing back texture. So I love the silk straw. This is an alchemy. I'm the only one who carries it, and people feel it, and it's kind of crinkly, and they don't know what to do with it. And then it blossoms into something that's just amazing here. And I've got my samples. I'm all about combining yarns so that when you knit them together, they're all ingredients in my recipe of life.
This is the mixology.
This is the mixology. So I look at my knitting as cooking. Spaghetti sauce, if you just put tomato paste on the table, no big deal. But you saute and onions and garlic and Italian sausage, and then you get a great pasta sauce, and that's what my knitting is. I never am one to buy 8 skeins of red in the same dye lot. It would stagnate me. Okay, so I have to take this and this and nothing. I write down the word matching, and then I cross it out, because the world doesn't match, and we spend so time. I get so many questions. Does this match? I don't believe in matching. I believe in complementing, coordinating.
Now, tell me just really quickly a little bit of history about your designing career before you did the yarn store.
I've always been a creative person. Mom fostered it. When 16, I said, Mom, I want to go live in Paris. And she says, okay, give it a try. So I got my wings not clipped, and I traveled the world, and I became a fashion designer. And I was here in New York for many years, and it became corporate. And so midlife crisis number 3, I went home and said, Mom, what do I do? And she hands me a bag of yarn and says, here, sell some yarn. And I'm like, she said, your inheritance is coming in bags of 10 anyway, so you might as well start now. So that was in the early 2000s, and I've just grown and grown and grown. She got a little snag. And I search for the things that no one stocks full time. I create things. We're featuring reverse speckle today. That's the reverse speckle. So what we do is we block out the color spots, we dye the skein, and then we go back in and paint the resist. So a little more labor intensive, a little more interesting. I'm all about a small part of glitter. I mean, you don't have to look like a disco ball, but just a little bit. See, now look at how lovely the lyrics would be in the little dots, okay?
That's true, that's true. Now tell me about this. This is a collaboration?
Yeah, this is Stephen West. And we go in, and he may recommend 3 skeins of hedgehog from Ireland. And I use one of those, or 2. And then I start mixing in all my collection that I've gathered. And I enjoy the shopping as much as I enjoy the journey, okay? And the destination, I never know if I get there. So I have to enjoy the shopping part of it, then the journey, and then some days we do quite well. And so I featured in the background, you'll see my whole shock of color, because I love, we're wearing sequins, so we're the Dream Girls and this weekend, and the sequins around the booth, but I have to have my spot of color because I believe in the pop. And we New Yorkers, gray and black, and I put a bright scarf around everyone because we must.
So you can see them better. Now tell me a little bit about your creative community in Minnesota, isn't it, where you are?
Minnesota, Minneapolis. I bought an old firehouse. I bought it because Anderson Cooper bought one here in New York, but I can't afford New York. So I went back to Minneapolis to take care of my mom, who started me in the business. And I have a firehouse, and I painted a zebra stripe around it. And Missy, who's here helping me this weekend, and her husband helped me open the Stephen B. Creative Community Foundation. And it's a nonprofit promoting fiber arts, because I believe that we all have a fiber artist within us, but we follow the rules so it doesn't get out sometimes. And that's why I'm here, motivational speaking, telling people how to break outside that box. And that's what my foundation does. So we go around and we collect yarn, rekit it, we give kits to schools and churches to inspire those that maybe don't knit or crochet. Yeah. We do a hat drive for Minneapolis. We collect over 3,000 hats every year. There's 14,000 homeless on the streets in Minneapolis alone at night. And then we do a fundraiser for some great organization like Head Start or something in Minneapolis. So that's my little charity passion that we do.
Okay, well look, just coming into the booth here, it is so gorgeous. It will get any knitter's creative juices flowing. So it's fantastic that you're on Fruity Knitting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Bye.
Color it up. Peace, love, and tie-dye.
Ciò che non mi piace